Hello, Jason. Hello, Janet. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. How you doing?
Hello.
You're great. Super excited to also have you both here. And I heard you also presented a keynote for us that you're going to co-moderate. So for everyone else to know, Jason and also Janet, they both believe that to be the best leader you can be, there's a series of questions that you should ask yourself. And I'm very interested in learning more about that. So from now on, the stage is yours for about the next 20 minutes.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for the time. And again, I'm Jason Jaggard, and this is Janet. Say hello, Janet.
Hello.
And we represent an executive coaching firm that has coaches all over the planet. Actually, we serve about 400 clients all over the place, from people running billion-dollar companies to professional athletes to elected officials. And I don't do as much of that these days. Janet is in the pocket a lot more than I am. And so she's kind of our resident expert coach for today. So her and I are going to be co-teaching some of the principles that we talk about that are really, really important to us. And I like the setup. I appreciate you mentioning some of the questions that are important to ask yourself. One of the things people may not realize is that their lives are shaped by the questions they ask and the questions that they don't ask. You know, like in relationships, in your productivity and innovation. As an example, you know, George Bernard Shaw said one time, some people look at the world as it is and say, why? I look at the world as it could be and say, why not? And that's a powerful question. It's a powerful question to say, not just, you know, why things, but why not something else? And so questions are powerful, and they can shape the way that we see ourselves. They can shape everything that's in our lives. And so what we're going to do is we're going to explore a few questions that we want to suggest are really, really powerful for you, specifically in a few ways. One is, and you know, obviously I can't see you, so quick, I'm imagining that you're going to do a show of hands thing right now, but quick show of hands. How many of you would like to have a little more energy, especially during the pandemic, especially during all the things that have gone on? Burnout is high. Motivation can sometimes suffer. So for those of you who'd like to have a little more energy, quick show of hands. Wonderful. I'm imagining at least one of you are raising your hands to have more energy. And then, you know, how many of you would like to perhaps increase, not just have more energy, which would be nice, but also increase your productivity and like to get a little more done, a little faster, especially on teams. If any of you work on teams, quick show of hands, how many of you like to get things done a little faster in terms of productivity? And so what we're going to talk about is a question or a series of questions that allow you to access more energy you have and actually get more done in a faster amount of time. And it's not the question that usually people would think that they would ask. So usually if you're talking about energy, you know, you're going to talk about how to like get good rest and how to like drink coffee. I'm not really a coffee person. I think Janet, you like coffee, don't you?
Oh, yes. Right.
There it is. It's 7:14 a.m. where we are in Los Angeles. So got up pretty early, coffeed up, right? Yeah. And there's those types of things. If you want to get more done, you're going to talk about prioritizing. If you're trying to be more productive, you're going to talk about how to focus, you know, those types of things. But the kind of question we want to explore with you today is fundamentally a different kind of question. And sometimes I feel nervous bringing it up because it sounds soft. It sounds kind of weak, or it sounds like something that doesn't belong in the workspace or the innovation space. And what we're going to talk about today is love, this idea of love. Janet, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay, sorry.
I'm excited to hear this.
You have to listen to me talk a lot. What we're talking about is love, and we define love as fierce advocacy. It's this idea of showing up because you're passionately for something. So this takes place predominantly in the context of relationships and teams. And what I want to do is I want to give you a distinction that we use in our coaching work. And this is something we use with CEOs of billion-dollar companies, but we also use it with our family and our friends. It transfers no matter who you're working with, no matter where you are in the world. And we want to invite a distinction. And actually, Janet and I are going to do an exercise together to kind of model this so you can see how it works. And we're going to invite you, if you're watching online, or if you're in a room right now, to kind of do this with us so you can see the power of this idea of fierce advocacy and how fierce advocacy actually creates energy and how it actually increases productivity. So first I want to introduce the distinction. So here's the distinction. Oftentimes when we are working with people, or when we're married to people, or when we're in any kind of relationship, we've got kids or any kind of relationship, quick show of hands, how many of you have ever experienced where they do something that you don't want or you don't like? Yeah, it's inevitable. If you're working on teams, or if you're married, or if you have a family, or whatever it is in dynamics, you're going to be in relationship with people who are not you, who are different than you, and who are going to do things that you don't like or you don't want. Now, in that moment, this is the distinction we call. We say that there are things that you want from them. And if you're an eager beaver note taker, you can write that down. What do I want from them? I want something from them. And so oftentimes in our relationships, or like if you're managing somebody, or if you have a boss, there's something that you want from your boss. You want more attention. You want more affirmation. You want a raise, and then there's things that you want. Maybe if you've got employees, there's things you want from your employees. You want them to get things done on time. You want them to pay attention when you talk, or whatever it is. If you have colleagues, there's things you want from your colleagues. If you're in a romantic relationship, there's things you want from the romantic relationship. And that's all fine, by the way. In fact, when you engage in a social contract like a boss-employee relationship, you have an agreement that you're going to give them something and they're going to give you something. And so there's nothing necessarily wrong with wanting something from someone. But what we want to suggest is there's an ancillary question that we want to walk alongside that question that actually creates energy and increases productivity. And I'll explain what it is, and then Janet and I'll do a quick exercise. So but alongside of asking, what do I want from someone, we want to invite you to, at the same time, ask the question, what do I want for someone? What do I want for them? So yeah, I want things from my boss. And oftentimes I think about all the things that I want from my boss, but rarely do I stop to think, yeah, but what do I want for my boss? I want her to be successful. I want her to get promoted, because then I can get promoted. I want her to grow in her leadership, because the better leader she becomes, the better I become. I want her to have a happy family if she's got a family. I want her to have a life and have hobbies. I want her to be happy, because the happier my boss is, generally the happier that I can be, right? There's things that I want from her. There's also things that I want for her. And you can say the same thing in your relationships with your kids. Yeah, there's things that you want from them. I want them to clean their rooms. I want them to be respectful to my partner. I want them to not talk that way to me sometimes, or to stop watching TV. Yeah, obviously there's things you want from them, but then there's also things you want for them. You want them to be successful. You want them to be happy. You want them to be brave. You want them to have good character. You want them to tell the truth. You want them to have a great job someday and have a great education, or whatever it is that you want for them. And here's what happens in this conversation. Oftentimes when we're stuck in the wanting things from people camp, it actually stops us from getting what we want. I don't know if anyone's ever come to you, and the only reason why they're talking to you is because they want something from you, whether it's a spouse or kids or colleagues or boss or employees or whoever. The only reason why they're talking to you, like quick show of hands, how many of you can tell when someone's talking to you? And the only reason why they're talking to you is because they want something from you. Everybody knows what that feels like. Now, again, not necessarily bad, but oftentimes, especially if you don't want to give something, it decreases the probability of them getting what they want or you getting what you want. Conversely, when you have a fromness place, when I go to my boss or my kids or my family or my employees and I want something for them, oftentimes not only do I get what I want, but both parties get something even better. We get something even bigger. And this is what I mean by creating energy and increasing productivity, is having a forness attitude, wanting things for people. It increases energy, because now it's not about me. It's just like when you love, for those of us who have kids, I've got nephews. When I think about how much I love my nephews, it excites me. It just makes me so happy. And I want to text them right now. I want to call, it's early in the morning, they would hate that, but I want to call them. I want to hang out with them, because I'm so connected to what do I want for them? It unleashes energy. And in the same way, it increases productivity, because how many of you, and this will be one of the last show of hands that I do, how many of you right now, there's something that you want from somebody else, but you are avoiding talking to them about it because you don't know if you're going to get it or not. Or there's a conversation that you want to have with someone, maybe a hard conversation or a challenging conversation, but you're nervous to have that conversation because you don't know if it's going to go well or not. But what I can tell you is getting to a place, shifting from fromness to forness will help you have those conversations faster, because it's easier to have conversations when you're coming from a place of forness. It's easy to have hard conversations when you're like, hey, I want you to win. I know you want me to win. Let's get into this conversation and let's do this thing. It helps you have conversations faster, which increases productivity faster, because then you can figure out why that email's not there. Then you can figure out why your husband didn't do whatever. Then you can figure out why the kids are doing what they're doing. Then you can figure out why the hard thing with the boss, maybe they're just having a bad day. The faster you can have conversations from a healthy place, the faster you can get things done. The faster you can get things done, the more productivity increases. So with that being said, I want to do an exercise. Janet has graciously volunteered, and she can add any thoughts or caveats. That's something that I said is kind of an intro to that. By the way, since we have a limited amount of time, we actually have a podcast that talks about all this stuff ad infinitum. We loved it for you to check it out. It's called Beyond High Performance. It's a fantastic way to explore these ideas and more. We have hours of content of our coaches talking with each other, and that's for free. So we just want you to check that out if you'd like. So it's Beyond High Performance. But Janet, thanks for being on our show.
Yes, great to be here.
And what I want to do is I want to do an exercise with you that Janet and I have done with executives all over the world, and our coaches do it all over the world almost daily. And so Janet, who's the person that you picked that you want to do this exercise with?
Oh, can I please pick my husband?
Yes, you can. So Janet is married to a wonderful man, and so he's not here right now. He's probably, I don't know where he's at. Is he asleep?
He's in the other room, so he won't hear.
Great. Okay, great.
Yeah. So
the first thing we usually start with is, hey, like, what do you want from Ryan? Like, and that's her husband's name. What is it that Ryan is not doing that you want, or like, what is it when you're coming from a place of fromness, and if you're doing this in the audience, you can think of a person that you want to do this exercise with, and you can say, what do you want from them? And so Janet, what do you think?
Yeah, it was great, because I know this exercise and I know where you're going, and I still notice the energy as I was thinking about what I want from him. But yeah, I would love this. This is a consistent thing. I would love for him to initiate dates.
Nice.
I would love less defensiveness in arguments. I would love him to kind of listen to my feelings without feeling like he needs to fix them. So these are some things that I would love from him.
You would love, and by the way, if you're listening, are any of those things wrong? Like, is it wrong? I'm going to go, you don't have to answer that, Janet, because obviously you don't think that it's wrong, but it's helpful to say it's not wrong to want someone to initiate dates. It's not wrong to want someone to get a little less defensive during arguments. It's not wrong to, what was the last one?
To listen before needing to fix.
Yes. Totally makes sense. Those things are totally fine. Now, Janet, have you ever gone to Ryan to have a conversation about those things or any other things where it's like, the reason why I'm talking is because I want something from you?
Yes.
Yeah. And how does that usually go?
Not well.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you might get lucky and they're like in a really great place emotionally to like handle that and be with that and say, hey, sweetheart, I'm so sorry, or whatever, right? There's those moments, but usually it doesn't go super well.
Yeah, usually it's experienced as criticism, or he's not doing a good job, or he's bad or wrong, or that's usually how it goes.
Yeah, for sure. So now we're going to pivot the thing. And again, we're not letting go of the initial thing. Like all those things that she wants are totally valid, totally fantastic. But if she's rooted in that, that's going to shape where she's coming from with her husband, Ryan, and it's going to shape the outcome of their relationship. So if you're asking the question, what can I get from somebody? At the beginning of this, we talked about questions. What can I get from somebody? That's going to shape the relationship. It commodifies the relationship, makes it transactional. Now, Janet, if I were to ask you, man, in your deepest heart, what do you want for Ryan? That might even connect to those three things. Like, what is it that you want for him? And if you're in the audience right now, be thinking about the person for you. If you had a list, like, what are the things you want from them? And you want to do this, if you're watching this right now, go ahead and take a second, write it down, think about it. What do I want for them? And Janet, what do you think?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Again, I notice that feels like a little bit more of a stretch for me to shift my mind to what I want for him. And I'm feeling my heart shift, but yes, I'd love, and yeah, it's harder to lift. I'm like, oh, it's harder to write things down here. I want him to experience love. Yeah. I want him to experience like acceptance. I want him to feel like he has space to be himself and make mistakes and show up and lead and be creative. And I want him to experience tenderness and warmth and partnership. Yeah, that's what I want for him.
Yeah, I love that. And even, because I know Ryan a little bit. And so like as a friend, I'd be like, man, I want him to experience the thrill of like hitting it out of the park with a date. Or I want him to experience like the thrill because it feels good. It feels, everybody, if you plan dates, no matter who you are in the relationship, everyone knows when you plan something and it goes sideways and it doesn't work. And, the reservation doesn't pan out or there's traffic and you're late or all those types of things. Right. But when it happens, when it's a home run, like, that you serve the person that you love well, that's a great feeling. And I want him to have that. Now, as we're talking about that, Janet, how would you, and again, we're not talking about letting go of the things that she wants. Like, it's not about invalidating the things that she wants. It's about wrapping what she wants in a container of love, in a container of advocacy. And so as we're talking about that, Janet, how would you describe the shift? You mentioned even somatically in your body, you're feeling something. Well, how would you describe that?
Yeah, it will. For one, it takes the attention off of me. And so the thing that I think I need so bad suddenly has less power. And I'm even thinking about a conversation last night where I chose to advocate for him. And I told him how much, like, I want him to feel heard and loved. And we talked about having a 4-day weekend and what are we going to do? And I mentioned maybe we can have a date. And he leapt at the idea. I was like, I would love that. Can I please take you out on a date on Friday? And I didn't have to ask. And so just the beauty of when I was moving towards him with zero expectation, he leapt at the chance, exactly like you just said. And I notice then I get to feel surprised and delighted. And it's not, oh, well, he better. There's no entitlement there. So I notice it enlarges my heart, honestly.
Yeah. And I like the word entitlement. Also, there's like almost like it's a demand. You come with demands versus coming with requests or coming with a desire of connection. Right.
Yeah.
And what it does is it helps begin framing things in a win-win scenario. Now, we only have a few minutes left, Janet. I'm going to blow through these last few questions. By the way, thank you very much. And hopefully for those who are watching, you're able to, if you didn't do it during our talk, you can do this later. It's an easy exercise, and maybe even buddy up with somebody because it's a little easier to do it with somebody else. That's kind of what gives coaches job security, is we hold a space for someone to do the things that are hard to do. It's like going to the gym. Everyone knows they're supposed to go to the gym, but it's easier to go when you have a trainer. And so sometimes it's that way. But do this exercise with a friend or a colleague or whatever, and watch how it shifts how you feel and how you see. And it gives you more creativity and access to resource to begin creating results that you were getting earlier. Again, it creates energy and it makes you more productive. Now, Janet, a few elements of advocacy that we haven't talked about yet. One is, of course, advocating for others, being forness. But there's another question about advocating for yourself. So it's not just about being for others. It's also being for yourself. And if you don't mind, I'd love to ask about so we work together and we exist in this broad firm. And so we're working around each other and we're all people. And so sometimes we're like sideways or whatever and don't always get along and those types of things. But I'd love to hear a story from you about how you've advocated for yourself in our firm, because I bet there's people who are listening who are in companies or entrepreneurs and trying to find healthy ways of advocating for themselves. How has that worked for you?
Yeah, well, honestly, there's one question that comes to mind that is my favorite question of all time. And if you're not already asking this, I highly recommend. I think I first did it with you maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I've now helped other coaches in the firm practice this one as well. But it's my favorite way to advocate for myself is asking the question, what would you need to see from me to be thrilled to XYZ? And that could be thrilled to bring me into your network, to send me work, to refer work to me, to ask me to join you on a certain project or keynote. What would you need to see from me? And I think that most people resist that question because it's pretty vulnerable. What happens if they say, I don't want to do that, or I think I need to see XYZ, everything. And then I find out I'm not as far along as I could be. But what it does is it opens you up to one, you're advocating for that thing that you want, whether it's more work, whether it's partnership, whether it's referrals. You're advocating for yourself, but you're also being vulnerable enough to say, hey, I want the feedback. Yeah. So tell me, I want to hear it. I find that to be one of the most powerful ways to advocate for yourself. I tell my clients about that question, and I find it to be super resourceful.
Yeah, I love that. Even like, so what would you need to see in me to get a raise? What would you need to see in me to get the promotion? What would you need to see in me? I like the fill in the blank, XYZ, that's what she's saying there. I don't know if that translates all around the world, but XYZ, fill in the blank. What would we need to see, right? And it is powerful. And what it does is it invites the other person to begin helping co-solve the problem with you versus it being just your problem. Now you're inviting them into that situation. And you're right, Janet, you are advocating for yourself. And I remember years ago, when you were a good coach, but we were just getting to know each other a little bit. And I was taking you across the country and we were doing these gigs, and you came up to me, and I was assigning coaches to work with different teams for this company we were working with. And you came up to me and you were like, "Hey, what would you need to see in me to let me play, to let me have a shot?" And it was great because when I reflected on it, there was no like future thing. It was like, well, we can do that right now.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't like a thing. And so sometimes it's like, I need to see this, this, and this. Other times it's like, oh, nothing, you can have it right now. And that really, that request changed the trajectory of our company. And now Janet, and I'll wrap up with this. So Janet was in some ways, this is years ago, a lower level coach in our firm, even though she was really talented. And she made one request. And now years later, she runs our international program that trains people how to create six-figure coaching practices.
It's a very, very inspiring story. So sorry to cut you here, because we need to be a little bit conscious of time. But definitely thank you so much for the exercise, for telling the whole thing, because I'm always passionate about advocating for others, especially being for people in times of competition and challenges. So thank you both for being here today. And with that, I give back to Lara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.